Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Joe Two in Love, here with episode number 40 of Sports Overview Topics. Thank you for joining me. If you're new to the podcast, like and subscribe for all your updates and notifications, on Sports Overview Topic, my pro wrestling's AEW reviews. Uh, find all that and more on the channel. With that, today I want to talk about the first week of free agency in the NFL is over, and I want to talk about the winners and losers kind uh, of free agency, uh, all the big moves that have been happening. Um, Also, I'll give my preview of UFC 260 this Saturday. Francis Ngannou versus Stipe Miocic 2, the rematch. And also I want to talk about a title fight that's going to happen in May for the Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira for the vacant UFC 155-pound title after Khabib officially retired. Also, are the Celtics in trouble? Find out in a sec. But first, I want to talk about because it's the news that I've been caring about and been getting a lot of fuss about it this week. The biggest move in free agency this week, or at least the move that's gotten people really rattled, is Andy Dalton to the Chicago Bears. Now, I have a friend who is a Bears fan, and he'll tell you that he's not a fan of Andy Dalton, and I mean, well, for me, the jury is still out because for Andy Dalton for the Bears. Firstly, well, now I get that Russell Wilson put the Bears out there as a possible trading partner that I would like to go to. Ones for including the Raiders, Cowboys, and the Saints. Well, the Bears made a big offer, um, according to what I've heard, was a bunch of first-round picks, a third, and two starters. Who are the starters, I'm not sure, but nonetheless, the Seahawks obviously didn't take it. And so the Bears instead signed Andy Dalton to a 1-year, $10 million deal. Now, yeah, the thing didn't work out with Trubisky, really. I mean, look, he was taken over Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. Had Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson hadn't become who they've become, I don't think Trubisky will have gotten as much hate as he has gotten. But nonetheless, here we are. I mean, Andy Dalton, look, with the Bengals, he was good. At times, really good. But people forget. I mean, for the first 5 years of his career, he went to the playoffs. Now, credit, they never won a playoff game, but so he did really well for the Bengals in the amount of time he went through. Now, the Bengals didn't really have a good defense, and also when you look at last year, the Cowboys had probably the worst defense in the NFL. Clear as day. If you look at it. Now, coming to a Bears team, which has a loaded defense that has a window, and there are some good things on the Bears that people kind of forget about. I mean, David Montgomery, he came on strong to end the year. He had a 1,000-yard season. Allen Robinson signed his franchise tag. Darnell Mooney, I thought was a really solid uh, first rounder, or a did a really solid rookie year. Excuse me. He wasn't a first rounder, but he showed he has speed, and I mean he isn't. Dalton isn't as mobile as Trubisky, but he still can move, and he has that connection with offense coordinator Bill Lazor, uh, who was there in Cincinnati. So it's not like it's horrible, but compared to some of the options that were out there, people are going to be agitated, obviously. But the jury's still out. We'll see how they do within the coming season. But they also, they got rid of Kyle Fuller for cap space, and they signed corner Desmond Trufant, who's staying in the division. So and so. As far as the winners of free agency the first week, I mean, first of all, the Chargers, I think, had a really good insight to what they needed to do for free agency. I mean, they lost Hunter Henry to the Patriots, and so they acquired Jared Cook. They signed center Corey Lindsey, and tackle Matt Filer. So clearly they're helping beef up the offensive line to protect Justin Herbert. Their win, for my opinion, also the Jaguars, I think, did a heck of a job in free agency as well. They signed corner Shaq Griffin. They trade for Malcolm Brown to up that D-line. They also signed Tyson Alualu, who comes back to the team that drafted him. They signed Marvin Jones to pair up with Laviska Shenault. So they got weapons, of course. They franchise tag Cam Robinson and keeping Andrew Norwell on that line. So they got some things working for when they draft Trevor Lawrence. They got some good things. And of course, the Patriots, I gotta say, are a winner. I mean, First of all, we drafted 2 tight ends last year, which barely did anything. So with that, we signed Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. Very good signing. And to also help out the wide receiver core, we signed Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar. Now, yes, they aren't big name household receivers, but they're going to add to that overall receiving core. Because, I mean, Elman, if he comes back healthy, N'Keal Harry, you know, he's not going to be asked to do as much as, I mean, yes, he was a first round pick, but with added help on that receiving core, it's going to help out everybody. Jacoby Myers, he did really well last year when he was targeted. And so you got some good wide receivers and tight ends adding to solid O-line. Now, yes, we lost Dooney to the Chiefs, but we re-signed Andrews, got back Karras, and traded for Trent Brown. So solid for offense side. And on defense side, you know, one of our probably our biggest problem last year was we couldn't stop the run. So we got Henry Anderson, we got Devon Gottschall to help out that D line. We got Matthew Judon. I mean, what more could say to help out that defense with our low secondary. Now, Patrick Chung, he did call it quits. He did retire, but I mean, he is. My thoughts on Patrick Chung was he was a solid safety for us for over a decade. I mean, he won 3 Super Bowls with us. I mean, he went to Philly in 2013, then quickly realized, okay, it's better if he stays with us. So he went back to us and had a hell of a career. Didn't have a lot of stats, but certainly contributed to that secondary for over a decade. So thank you, Patrick Chung, on a hell of a career. So moving from the Patriots, the Bills also did some good things, and not a lot, but they did enough in free agency. I mean, they lost John Brown, but they signed Emmanuel Sanders. They lost Ty Neshy on the O-line, but they re-signed Darrell Williams. Not a lot, but they did a couple moves. The Jets made some quality moves. I mean, they signed Carl Lawson and Court Davis and Jared Davis. Some quality moves, but what the big question is how they're going to do at quarterback is a question. Excuse me. The Browns helped out themselves in a good way. They signed John Johnson and Troy Hill to help beef up that secondary. who's going to get back Grant Delpit. And of course, you got Denzel Ward. So that's going to really help their team. The Bengals, they signed Riley Reeve. I expect them to do more on that line, but, still, things are to come. I mean, I have to give it to the Chiefs as well. They had a solid job. I mean, even though they cut Fisher and Schwartz, they signed Kyle Long and Joe Thuney. Austin Ryder is a free agent, so I'm curious to see what they're going to do. But they re-signed Mike Remmers. Of course, they got Andrew Wiley, and Tardif. It's a bunch of questions, but they look good. As far as the Raiders go, they're confusing. They traded Gabe Jackson. They traded Rodney Hudson. They re-signed Richie Incognito. They traded Trent Brown. It's curious. I mean, all the starters, 3 of the 5 starters that were on that line. Now, they did re-sign Andre James at center, so they got an idea, and they saw Denzel Good. So, I mean, they still got depth, but it's kind of curious what they're going to do at that other tackle slot. But right now, I have to say they're with 2 other winners, I'd say, are the Giants and Washington football team. The Giants on offense really beefed up. I mean, round out their receiving core. They signed John Ross, who, when healthy, can fly past anybody. They signed Kenny Galladay over the weekend, and that's a very big move. Very big. When he's healthy, also. And Kyle Rudolph to pair with. Still kind of curious to see what they're going to do with Evan Ingram, but when you look at all the weapons, and if Barkley comes back healthy, then Daniel Jones, I mean, looking at it on paper, the Giants should win the division, but we'll see. So far, it's interesting if you're a Giants fan. Of course, I said for the Washington as well. They signed Ryan Fitzpatrick, whichever you want to say. And they signed Curtis Samuel to pair up with Terry McLaurin. So they won in a good way in free agency. The Lions were kind of They made some moves. They signed Brashad Perriman and Tyrell Williams, 2 nice receivers. But, I mean, of course, they traded for Goff. Got some good running backs, but, The Cardinals, of course, they acquired J.J. Watt. They traded for Rodney Hudson. I mean, they acquired Brian Winters. So clearly they're trying to beef up that protection for Kyle Murray. So it'll be interesting. And AJ Green. So we'll see how it goes. And the last two teams I want to talk about, though, in free agency are the Titans and the Rams. The Titans, they cut Dennis Kelly, who is replacing, Jack Conklin, who went to Cleveland last year. But as far as the defense goes, they signed the Nico Autry and they signed Bud Dupree to help out that defense pass rush, as well as Janoris Jenkins, Jackrabbit, in the secondary. So, interesting. On the O-line, I predict that they'll move Sam Braylo, who is the backup when Taylor Lewan went down, to the right side, but it's interesting. And then for the Rams, they traded away Michael Brockers, and acquired Deshaun Jackson to take that piece over top. So, interesting for those teams. Next, I want to talk about UFC 260 preview. Stipe versus Francis, the rematch. Now, they fought in their first bout, UFC 220. Stipe, he was kind of still a relatively new champion at the time. I mean, he beat Werdum at 198, and then, he beat Overeem and Dos Santos avenged that loss, but he was still kind of relatively new as a champion. And Francis, he was coming on his hot streak. He stopped Arlovsky. He stopped Overeem in vicious fashion. So, now, Stipe was getting clipped in the first round by Francis, but Stipe weathered the storm and pressured Ngannou, used takedowns, used the wrestling to dry out and take it out of Francis, and ultimately won the fight. Since then, Stipe, he lost to Cormier and came back to win 2 straight times against Cormier. Now, it's going to be very interesting, the rematch. The winner, I think, likely faces Volkov. in the next fight. But I'm just going to go with Francis. I mean, another friend I talked to asked me about the fight. I said, well, Stipe's been on this long run. I mean, yes, he lost to. If you take out the loss to Cormier, he's been on this long run. After he lost that war versus Junior, the first fight, he's been on this long run. He stopped Mark Hunt. He beat Arlovsky. Then he beat Ordum, Overeem. I mean, Dos Santos, Francis, DC twice. It's just like, when you've been on the long run and I just think how hungry is Stipe compared to Francis. Is always the question. Because Stipe has been on the mountaintop not once but twice. Francis is still. I mean, Francis has been on a tear, whether it's ever since losing to Stipe and that boring fight for Derek Lewis. He beat Curse Blades, he beat Kane, he beat Dos Santos, he beat Rosenstripe. I mean, it's like, who else does he need? Now, we haven't seen a lot of Francis. He's still kind of young to sport. The only one to really take Francis to deep waters is Stipe. And it only takes one, so it'll be interesting to see how this fight lasts on Saturday night. Another fight I want to talk about was, like I said, so Khabib Nurmagomedov has officially retired after his last fight with Justin Gaethje. He officially called it quits. Now the UFC lightweight title is vacant, and a new champion has to be crowned. So UFC 262, Toyota Center, Michael Chandler, Iron Michael Chandler, who came in and had a stellar debut. First, Dan Hooker, stopping him in the first round. First, Charles Oliveira, who's been on a hell of a win streak, which culminated in a dominant win over Tony Ferguson in his last fight. I mean, it was curious to see how it was going to go down because Dustin Poirier just beat Conor, and it looks like they may be on the verge to do a trilogy. Plus, you got Justin Gaethje, who I bet might be in line for the winner of this fight, but we'll see. But it's going to be an interesting test for both sides because Chandler has only had one fight in the UFC. And it was very little. So he's so new to the sport, or not to the sport, but UFC. And I'm not sure if he's fought someone as lanky and as, I mean, maybe Benson Henderson, but hasn't fought someone as tall, as lanky, and as thrilled in jiu-jitsu as Charles Oliveira is. But it'll be an interesting test because Chandler is well versed in wrestling and his striking and his power. Oliveira is really skilled in his jiu-jitsu. He has the record for most submissions in the UFC. It's going to be an interesting test. Last topic I want to touch on today was the Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics, currently number 7 seed in the Eastern Conference, are in trouble. I mean, they got a win last night, but prior to that, they were on a 3-game losing streak and definitely in doo-doo. I mean, look, I know they got Jaylen Brown, they got Jason Tatum, they got Kemba Walker, but it just doesn't feel the same. I think that's a problem. And also LeBron. Gotta worry about if you're a Lakers fan. LeBron suffered a high ankle sprain. And thus, he's going to be out indefinitely. So, now, the Lakers are in good positioning. They're the number 3 seed in the West. But as far as playoffs go, if you don't have LeBron, that's a very scary situation. And, I mean, Anthony Davis is still been out. So, very interesting to see how it goes on. But those were my thoughts on those topics. That was the episode for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I did. Good episode. Like I said, if you're new, like and subscribe. I'll be back Thursday with my AEW Dynamite review. But thank you all. See you Thursday. And peace. Be safe.